Have you ever had just a weird or unwanted or even an upsetting thought just pop into your head out of nowhere? Yeah, of course you have. We all do. They're called intrusive thoughts, and honestly, they're a totally normal part of being human. But they can definitely feel overwhelming sometimes. So today, we're going to break down why they happen and give you a real practical toolkit for managing them. Let's dive in.
Okay, let's try a little experiment. Right now, don't think about a white bear. Seriously, try as hard as you can not to picture a white bear. So, what popped into your head? I'm willing to bet it was a big, fluffy white bear. This is a classic psychology experiment, and it just perfectly shows the core problem we're talking about today. The very act of trying not to think about something makes it pretty much impossible to ignore.
And there's a name for this phenomenon. It's called the paradoxical effect. When you try to push a thought away, you're basically shouting to your brain, hey, this thought is super important and really dangerous. And your brain, trying to protect you, keeps it right there, front and center. This creates this vicious cycle that we call the intrusive thought trap. But the good news is you can absolutely learn how to step out of it. And this right here, this is probably the most important idea we are going to cover. The thought itself, it has no power. It's just a bit of mental noise. The problem, the real problem, is our reaction to it. If you can change that reaction, you change absolutely everything. So, okay, how do we actually do that? Well, first, we need to shift our entire relationship with our thoughts. This first set of techniques is all about moving from a place of fighting and struggling to a place of just observing. This brings us to a really powerful technique from something called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's called thought diffusion. Look at the difference here. On the left, you're fused with the thought, I am an anxious person. You and the thought are one and the same. But look at the right. I am noticing I'm having the thought that I am anxious. See that? Just that tiny change in language creates this little pocket of space. You're no longer the thought. You're the one observing it. That space is everything. All right, this next one might feel a little weird, a bit counterintuitive. Instead of fighting the thought, you just let it be there. Yep, you just acknowledge it without judging it, and you watch it like a cloud drifting across the sky. A really great way to think about this is the wave analogy. An intrusive thought is like a wave in the ocean. If you struggle and fight against it, you're just going to get tossed around. But if you just let it be, it will rise, it will peak, and then it will naturally fade away all on its own. You don't have to do anything to it. This leads us to another really powerful tool. It's all about thinking about our thinking. When a thought really hooks you and starts to pull you in, just pause for a second and ask yourself this one simple question. Is it actually helpful for me to analyze this thought right now? 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be a clear nope. And that simple check-in gives you the permission you need to just consciously shift your focus somewhere else. So changing your whole mindset, that's the long-term goal. But what do you do when you're right in the middle of a thought spiral? For that, we need some in-the-moment tools. So let's open up the mental first aid kit. So the first tool is part of this simple 3-step plan for immediate relief. The moment you catch yourself in that negative loop, the very first step is to firmly, just in your head, say or even visualize the word stop. It acts like a pattern interrupt, a mental break that just snaps you out of that automatic cycle. Okay, so you've hit the brakes with stop. What's next? The next step is to ground yourself. And you do that by getting out of your head and into your senses. You reconnect with the physical world. This pulls your brain's resources away from that thought and anchors you right here in the present moment. And one of the most effective ways to do that is with a technique called sensory grounding. It's super easy to remember with a simple countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let me show you exactly how it works. This is so practical. Wherever you are, you can just pause and mentally name 5 things you can see, then 4 things you can physically feel or touch, then 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and finally, 1 thing you can taste. By deliberately engaging all 5 senses like that, you anchor yourself in the present, which makes it really, really difficult for your brain to keep fueling that intrusive thought. And the final step in our little first aid kit is to switch. Once you've stopped the thought and grounded yourself in your senses, you need to actively redirect your attention. Think of your brain like a radio. You can't just turn off the static. You have to consciously tune in to a new station. Now that we've got our in-the-moment tools, let's talk about building a more resilient mind for the long haul. These next strategies are all about training your brain to be less vulnerable to intrusive thoughts in the first place. Okay, this is a fantastic technique. You literally schedule a short, specific worry appointment for later in the day. So when an anxious thought comes up, you just acknowledge it, maybe jot it down, and tell yourself, okay, got it. I'll deal with you at 5 p.m. And what's so fascinating is that by the time your appointment actually arrives, most of those thoughts have lost their emotional power and don't even seem worth worrying about anymore. Here we have a core tool from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. You basically become a detective for your own thoughts. You take the intrusive thought, like, I will fail the important meeting, and you put it on trial. You look for evidence for it, and then you look for evidence against it, just like you see in this table. And then you deliver a verdict, a more balanced, rational thought. You're not just ignoring the thought, you're actively taking it apart with logic.
So think about this. Your brain's working memory, it's a finite space. There's only so much room. An intrusive thought tries to take up all of that room, but it can't compete when you fill that space with something else that's really complex. By diving into a hard logic puzzle, or a strategy game, or even some challenging mental math, you essentially crowd out the unwanted thought. You starve it of the mental resources it needs to survive. We have covered a lot of ground, from these big picture mindset shifts to very specific in-the-moment tools. So now let's bring it all together and really focus on the core strategy for taking control of your inner world. If you remember nothing else from our time today, remember this 3-step process. First, awareness. Just notice that you're having a thought as a mental event, no judgment. Second, distancing. Create that space using those techniques like diffusion. I'm having the thought that. And third, redirection. Consciously shift your focus to something that actually matters to you. Awareness, distancing, redirection. And this is incredibly important to say. While these tools are so powerful for everyday intrusive thoughts, if your thoughts are causing you severe distress, if they're constant, or if they lead to compulsive behaviors, it might be a sign of a condition like OCD. Please reach out to a mental health professional. Getting support is a true sign of strength. Let's end on this powerful idea, because it really gets to the heart of the whole matter. It's a reminder that you are not alone in this. Having these thoughts doesn't make you weird or broken. It just makes you human. The real power doesn't come from getting rid of the thoughts, but from changing your relationship to them. So, I'll leave you with this question. Armed with this new toolkit, what's one thing you'll try the next time an intrusive thought shows up? Whether it's that paradoxical acceptance, or the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, or just adding the phrase, I'm noticing the thought that, you now have a choice. And that choice is where your power lies.